Far beyond Earth, across thousands of star systems, the galaxy was full of powerful empires. Some ruled hundreds of planets. Some had fleets so large that their ships covered the sky like dark clouds. Others had weapons strong enough to destroy entire worlds. War was common in the galaxy. Strong species attacked weak species. Empires fought each other for resources, territory, and power. Many civilizations rose, and many civilizations disappeared. But in the middle of all this chaos, there was one strange rule. A rule that every experienced warrior knew: never attack humans. It was not written in law. It was not enforced by any galactic council, yet almost every powerful empire followed it. Young soldiers often ask the same question: why? Humans did not look dangerous. Their planet was small. Their technology was not the most advanced. Their ships were not the largest. Their armies were not the biggest. Compared to the great empires of the galaxy, humans looked ordinary. Sometimes they even looked weak. Because of this, many young commanders believed the warning was just an old myth, a story told to scare new warriors. But the older generals never laughed at that rule. Whenever someone mentioned attacking Earth, the room usually became silent. Very silent. Because the older warriors remembered things the younger ones did not. They remembered history. Long ago, when humans first entered space, many alien empires noticed them. At that time, humans were new to the galaxy. Their ships were simple. Their colonies were few. To many powerful species, Earth looked like an easy target. One small planet, one young civilization, an easy victory. At least that was what they thought. The first empire that tried to invade Earth was the Carthul Dominion. They were known as one of the strongest military powers in the galaxy. Their soldiers were massive creatures covered in natural armor. Their ships were powerful war machines designed only for battle. When the Carthul fleet arrived near Earth, they expected a quick victory. But something strange happened. Humans did not surrender. Instead, they fought. At first, the Carthul commanders were amused. Human ships were smaller and weaker than their own. Their weapons looked simple. Their fleets were tiny compared to the massive Carthul armada. The Carthul expected the war to last only a few hours, but hours turned into days. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And the humans were still fighting. Not only fighting, learning, adapting, improving. Every battle became harder for the Carthul fleet. Human ships began to move differently. Their tactics changed quickly. New weapons appeared. Their defenses became stronger. It was as if the humans were studying the enemy during the war, and using that knowledge immediately. Soon the Carthul commanders realized something terrifying. Humans were not just fighting. They were evolving. The war that was supposed to be easy became a nightmare. After 2 years of brutal fighting, the Carthul Dominion finally retreated. It was the first time in their long history that they had lost a war. News of their defeat spread quickly across the galaxy. At first, many empires did not believe it. How could a young species defeat one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy? But the truth could not stay hidden for long. More empires decided to test the humans, and each time the same thing happened. The humans fought. They learned. They adapted. And eventually, they won. Some wars lasted months. Some lasted years. But every empire that attacked Earth discovered the same terrifying truth. Humans were extremely difficult to defeat. They were creative. They were stubborn. And they never stopped improving. Because of this, many alien leaders slowly made the same decision. It was simply not worth it. Attacking humans was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too costly. Over time, a quiet rule spread across the galaxy. Leave Earth alone. Older warriors passed this warning to younger soldiers. Experienced commanders reminded their fleets, never attack humans. But time has a strange effect on history. As decades passed, many young warriors began to forget the old wars. The stories sounded exaggerated. Impossible. How could one small species defeat so many powerful empires? Some believed the old generals were simply afraid. Others believed the stories were propaganda. And some believed humans were just lucky. Because of this, curiosity slowly returned. Some ambitious leaders began to wonder something dangerous. What if the stories were wrong? What if humans were not as powerful as the legends claimed? What if Earth was actually the easiest conquest in the galaxy? These thoughts slowly began to spread. And one day, a certain warlord heard those stories. Unlike the old generals, he did not feel fear. He felt excitement. Because if the legends were false, conquering Earth would make him famous across the entire galaxy. But if the legends were true, then he was about to start a war that the galaxy had been trying to avoid for centuries. And soon the stars themselves would witness a terrible mistake. Commander Zalthor of the Zarex Empire was not a patient leader. He was known across many star systems for one thing: victory through force. Wherever his fleets traveled, planets quickly surrendered. Those who resisted were crushed without mercy. Over the years, Zalthor had built a reputation that few commanders could match. 12 civilizations had fallen under his command. Entire star systems now belonged to the Zarex Empire because of his campaigns. His soldiers respected him and his enemies feared him. Because of this long history of victories, Zalthor believed there was nothing in the galaxy that his fleet could not defeat. One day, during a military council on the massive flagship Iron Dominion, a young officer mentioned something unusual. "Commander," the officer said carefully, "there is one region of space that many empires avoid." Zalthor raised an eyebrow. "Avoid?" he repeated. The officer nodded and activated a large holographic map of the galaxy. Hundreds of stars appeared in glowing blue light. Then one small area became highlighted. "That system," the officer explained. "It belongs to a species called humans." The room became quiet. Several older generals exchanged uneasy looks. They had heard that name before. But Zalthor simply laughed. "Humans?" he said with amusement. "You mean the small species from the blue planet Earth?" The officer nodded again. "Yes, Commander. Many empires say attacking them is extremely dangerous." At this, one of the oldest generals slowly spoke. "Commander, those warnings are not rumors." The room grew even quieter. The old general stepped forward and looked directly at Zalthor. For centuries, experienced warriors have avoided human territory. The stories are clear. Every empire that attacked them suffered heavy losses. Zalthor leaned back in his command chair. "And yet," he replied calmly, "humans still control only one small region of space." The general hesitated. "That is true, but—" Zalthor interrupted him. "Then the truth is obvious," he said. "They survived because stronger empires chose not to finish the job." Some officers in the room nodded in agreement. To them, the explanation made perfect sense. But the older generals were not convinced. They had studied the ancient battle records. And those records told a very different story. The old general activated another hologram. This time it showed damaged fleets, destroyed warships, and battle reports from long ago. "These are the records of past invasions," he explained quietly. "Many powerful empires tried to conquer Earth." Zalthor looked at the images with mild curiosity. "Then they failed," the general continued. "Every single one." Some officers shifted uneasily. "Humans fight differently," the general added. "They adapt faster than any species we have studied. During battle, they learn new tactics, improve their weapons, and change strategies quickly." Another general spoke. "That is why many warriors say attacking humans is a death sentence." For a moment, silence filled the command chamber. Then Zalthor began to laugh. Not a small laugh, a loud, confident laugh. "So this is the famous warning," he said. He stood and walked slowly toward the giant star map. "You are telling me that the great Zarex Empire should fear a young species with outdated ships?" No one answered. Zalthor turned back toward his officers. "Look around you," he said proudly. "Our fleet is the strongest in this sector. Thousands of warships, advanced weapons, elite soldiers." He pointed at the glowing image of Earth. "And you expect me to believe that this small planet is somehow dangerous?" The younger officers shook their heads. To them, the idea sounded ridiculous. Zalthor crossed his arms. "We will settle this question once and for all," he declared. He gave a single order: "Prepare the fleet." The room froze. Even the younger officers looked surprised. But Zalthor's voice remained calm and confident. "We will travel to human space," he continued. "We will test these legends ourselves." The old generals tried to protest. "Commander, this could be a terrible mistake." But Zalthor had already turned away. "History remembers the bold," he said coldly. Outside the massive flagship, thousands of Zarex warships slowly began to move. Engines ignited across the fleet. A powerful armada was preparing for war. Far away across silent stars, the small blue planet Earth continued to orbit its sun peacefully. The humans had no idea that one of the largest alien fleets in the galaxy was now heading directly toward them. But across the galaxy, other empires were watching. And when they saw the Zarex fleet moving toward human space, many of them whispered the same words. This will not end well. The Zarex fleet moved through the silent darkness of space like a giant storm. Thousands of massive warships traveled together in perfect formation. Their engines burned bright blue as they crossed star systems one by one. Inside the command ship Iron Dominion, Commander Zalthor watched the navigation screen with calm confidence. Estimated arrival to the human system, he asked. A navigation officer quickly answered. 2 hours, Commander. The bridge was quiet, but the tension in the air was growing. The younger officers looked excited. Many of them believed they were about to witness the easiest conquest in Zarex history, but the older generals were not smiling. They stood silently, watching the star map as the fleet approached the Sol system. Soon, the yellow star of that system appeared on the main screen. Sol, the home star of humanity. Entering human territory, the navigation officer announced. Strangely, nothing happened. No alarms, no defensive fleets, no warning signals. The system looked peaceful. Several planets slowly moved around the bright star. Asteroid belts floated silently through space. Small human satellites orbited distant worlds. Everything looked normal. Almost too normal. Commander Zalthor leaned forward. Scan the system, he ordered. Moments later, the sensors began to report their findings. Several human ships detected near the outer system. Civilian mining stations near the asteroid belt. Communication satellites around the third planet. The officer paused. Third planet identified as Earth. The large blue world appeared on the screen. Clouds moved across its surface. Oceans reflected the light of the star. From space, the planet looked calm and peaceful. Zalthor studied it carefully. This is the legendary human world, he asked. Yes, Commander. He leaned back in his chair. I expected something more impressive. Some officers quietly laughed. To them, Earth looked like an ordinary planet. Then something unexpected happened. A small signal appeared on the communication console. Commander, we are receiving a message. The entire bridge turned toward the screen. Display it, Zalthor ordered. A moment later, a human face appeared on the holographic display. The human looked calm. Very calm. He wore a simple military uniform and spoke in a steady voice. This is Captain Daniel Reyes of the United Earth Defense Fleet. The human paused. Then he continued. You have entered restricted human space. Many Zarex officers exchanged amused looks. The human captain did not look afraid at all. Instead, he looked patient. You will turn your fleet around immediately, the human said. The bridge erupted with laughter. Thousands of warships stood behind Commander Zalthor, and a single small human ship was giving them orders. The arrogance of it seemed almost funny, but Captain Reyes did not react to the laughter. His expression remained completely calm. You have one chance to leave peacefully, he said. After that, we will respond. Silence slowly returned to the command bridge. For a moment, even Zalthor studied the human carefully. There was something strange about his voice. No fear, no panic, just certainty. But the Zarex commander quickly pushed that thought away. He stood up slowly and walked toward the communication screen. You are speaking to Commander Zalthor of the Zarex Empire, he said proudly. Behind him, the giant fleet waited in perfect formation. You are surrounded by the most powerful war fleet in this sector. He leaned closer to the hologram. And you think one small ship can stop us? The human captain did not change his expression. He simply replied with quiet confidence. You misunderstand. Zalthor narrowed his eyes. Oh? Captain Reyes looked directly into the alien commander's eyes. You are not facing one ship. He paused for a moment. You are facing humanity. The bridge of the Iron Dominion became completely silent. For a brief moment, none of the Zarex officers spoke. Then the laughter returned. Louder than before. You expect us to believe that? One officer said. Another added, our scanners detect only a few human vessels. Captain Reyes listened quietly. Then he spoke again. That is correct. The simple answer confused several officers. Commander Zalthor folded his arms. You admit your fleet is small? Yes. And yet you still threaten us? Yes. The calm confidence in the human's voice began to irritate the Zarex commander. You are either very brave, Zalthor said slowly, or very foolish. Captain Reyes did not react. I am simply giving you a choice. Zalthor smiled. A choice? Yes. The human officer spoke clearly so that every alien on the bridge could hear him. Leave now. And this ends peacefully. Zalthor turned toward his officers. Or, he asked mockingly. Captain Reyes answered without hesitation. Or you will become another lesson in galactic history. The room grew quiet again. Several younger officers looked confused, but the older generals slowly lowered their eyes. They had heard words like this before. Long ago, Commander Zalthor finally lost his patience. He waved his hand dismissively. This conversation is over. Captain Reyes gave one final warning. Commander, you still have time to leave. But Zalthor had already made his decision. He turned toward his weapons officer. Prepare the fleet. The officer hesitated for a second. Then he followed the command. Target the human ship. Alarms began to echo across the massive bridge. Energy weapons powered up across thousands of Zarex warships. Bright lights appeared along the sides of their battle cruisers. Outside the flagship, the entire armada slowly aimed its weapons toward the small human vessel. The difference in size was almost absurd. One tiny ship against an entire fleet. Zalthor watched the targeting screen with satisfaction. Let the galaxy see what happens when someone challenges the Zarex Empire. He raised his hand. The weapons officer waited for the final command. For a brief moment, Captain Reyes looked down at his console. Then he spoke one last time. You were warned. Zalthor lowered his hand. Fire. Thousands of weapons flashed at the same time. Beams of destructive energy rushed toward the small human ship. The attack should have destroyed it instantly. But something impossible happened. The human ship did not explode. Instead, it disappeared. For a second, every scanner on the Zarex fleet went silent. Confused officers stared at their screens. Commander, the target is gone. Zalthor frowned. Impossible. But before anyone could speak again, a new signal suddenly appeared across every Zarex sensor. Not one signal. Hundreds, then thousands. Ships. Human ships. They appeared across the entire solar system. Behind the fleet. Above them. Below them. Hidden positions that had been invisible only seconds before. And suddenly the Zarex armada was no longer the hunter. It was surrounded. On the command bridge, the old generals slowly closed their eyes. Because they finally knew the truth. The legends had never been exaggerated. And Commander Zalthor had just made the worst mistake of his life. For a moment, the entire Zarex fleet was frozen in confusion. Just seconds ago, their weapons had fired at the lone human ship. The attack should have destroyed it instantly. Instead, the vessel had vanished from every scanner. Commander Zalthor stared at the sensor display with growing irritation. Find that ship, he ordered. The sensor officers quickly began scanning the surrounding space again. Waves of detection signals spread across the solar system, but the result was the same. The small human ship was gone. Before anyone could explain what had happened, another officer suddenly spoke. Commander, new contacts detected. Zalthor frowned. How many? The officer looked at the screen again as if he did not trust what he was seeing. Hundreds. Another pause. Correction. Thousands. The large display in the center of the bridge suddenly changed. Red markers began appearing across the entire star system. Ships. Human ships. They appeared near distant planets. Some emerged from behind moons. Others came out of hidden positions inside asteroid fields. More signals appeared every second. Within moments, the empty solar system had become full of warships. The younger Zarex officers stared in shock. Where did they come from? One general spoke quietly. They were always here. Commander Zalthor quickly recovered his confidence. Hidden ships do not change anything, he said. Our fleet is still larger. But the sensor officer shook his head slowly. There is something unusual about these vessels. What do you mean? They are not moving like normal fleets. On the screen, the human ships began shifting positions with incredible speed. Their movements were perfectly coordinated. Groups of ships formed new patterns instantly. Some disappeared from sensors for a second and then reappeared in different positions. It looked less like a fleet and more like a living network. The Zarex tactical officers tried to predict their movements, but the patterns kept changing. Commander, one officer said nervously, they are surrounding us. It was true. The human fleet had slowly closed every escape path. The Zarex armada now sat in the center of a massive invisible trap. Still, Zalthor refused to believe the situation was dangerous. He turned to his weapons commander. Prepare full attack formation. The order spread across thousands of alien warships. Heavy cannons rotated into position. Missile systems armed themselves. Energy shields powered up across the fleet. The Zarex Empire had fought countless wars, and they had never lost a battle when their full fleet opened fire. Target nearest human vessels, Zalthor commanded. The tactical officer locked onto several ships near the outer defense line. They are small, the officer said. Destroying them should be easy. Zalthor gave a cold smile. Then begin. Bright flashes filled the darkness of space as hundreds of Zarex weapons fired again. Energy beams raced toward the human fleet. Missiles streaked across the void. For a moment, the alien officers believed victory was already certain. But the human ships moved in ways they had never seen before. Instead of scattering in panic, they adjusted. Ships shifted positions with perfect timing. Some attacks missed completely. Others struck energy fields that redirected the blasts away from nearby vessels. And some weapons simply passed through empty space, because the human ships had already moved somewhere else. The Zarex officers watched the battle with growing confusion. This is impossible, one of them whispered. They had expected fear, chaos, desperation, but the humans showed none of it. Their movements were calm, precise, calculated, like experienced hunters who had already studied their prey. Then the humans finally attacked. At first, the Zarex officers did not even realize it had started. A single Zarex cruiser near the edge of the fleet suddenly vanished from the sensor screen. Commander, we lost contact with warship Varkul. Zalthor frowned. Destroyed. No explosion detected. Before anyone could discuss it, another signal disappeared. Then another. Ships across the outer formation began vanishing one by one. No explosions. No warning. Just silence. What weapon are they using? Zalthor demanded. The sensor teams searched desperately for an answer, but they could not detect any energy signature strong enough to destroy a battleship. Commander, we cannot identify the attack. Across the solar system, the human fleet continued moving smoothly. Small groups of ships approached the Zarex formation, attacked and then disappeared again. Each time they returned, another alien vessel vanished from existence. Panic slowly began spreading through the younger officers. Our outer defense line is collapsing. Zalthor slammed his fist against the command console. Hold formation. But holding formation was becoming impossible. Human ships were appearing everywhere. Above the fleet. Below it. Inside it. It was as if space itself had become their weapon. Zarex gunners tried to fire back, but their targets kept disappearing before they could lock on. The human vessels moved faster than their sensors could track. Another alarm sounded. Commander, we lost 3 destroyers near the rear formation. A different officer shouted. 2 carriers just vanished. The bridge of the Iron Dominion filled with warning lights. For the first time since the war began, Commander Zalthor felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. The old generals, however, were not surprised. One of them stepped closer to the command chair. I warned you, he said quietly. But Zalthor did not answer. Outside the flagship, the massive Zarex fleet was slowly breaking apart. Entire sections of the armada were disappearing from existence. Human ships continued their calm and precise attacks. They were not rushing. They were not celebrating. They were simply removing targets one by one, like surgeons performing a careful operation. Another cruiser vanished. Then a battleship. Then an entire formation of smaller escort ships. The Zarex Empire had brought one of the largest fleets in its history, and yet the humans were dismantling it piece by piece. Across the bridge, the younger officers watched in growing fear. How are they doing this? One of the old generals finally answered. Preparation. He looked toward the distant blue planet on the main screen. The Zarex fleet had arrived believing they were hunters, but now the truth was becoming painfully clear. They had sailed directly into the territory of a species that had spent centuries preparing for war, and the battle had only just begun. The battle across the solar system continued, but the chaos that the Zarex Empire expected never appeared. Instead of loud explosions and desperate fighting, the conflict unfolded with a strange, calm precision. Human ships moved quietly through space, adjusting their positions with careful timing. Every movement looked planned. Every attack looked measured. Inside the Zarex flagship Iron Dominion, the command bridge was filled with flashing warnings. Another cruiser lost! 2 carriers gone from the northern sector. Commander, our formation is breaking apart. The reports kept coming faster than the officers could process them. Commander Zalthor stared at the large tactical screen. Red icons that represented Zarex warships were slowly disappearing. Each time one vanished, the display adjusted silently. At first, the Zarex commander believed it was some advanced weapon. But after watching several minutes of combat, he realized something far more troubling. The humans were not simply destroying ships. They were studying them. Every time a Zarex formation changed position, the human fleet responded immediately with a perfect counter. When Zarex ships attempted long-range attacks, human vessels moved just outside the firing range. When Zarex fighters tried close combat, the human fleet suddenly shifted formation and trapped them. Between multiple defense lines, it was as if the humans already knew every possible tactic. Commander, a sensor officer said nervously. Their response time is extremely fast. How fast? Zalthor demanded. Almost instant. The officer swallowed. It is like they predicted our moves before we made them. One of the older generals slowly nodded. That is exactly what they are doing. The bridge fell silent again. The general continued speaking. For centuries, humans have studied every alien species they encountered. They record tactics, weapon patterns, and battle strategies. He pointed at the tactical screen. Now they are using all that knowledge. Zalthor clenched his fists. You are saying they expected us to attack? The general answered calmly. They expected someone to attack eventually. Outside the flagship, another wave of human ships appeared near the outer battle line, but this time something unusual happened. Instead of attacking immediately, several human vessels broadcast a powerful signal across the Zarex communication network. The signal carried a message, not just to one ship, to every ship in the invading fleet. The communication system activated automatically. A calm human voice filled the bridge. This is the United Earth Defense Command. The message echoed across thousands of Zarex warships at the same time. You were warned before the battle began. Several Zarex officers looked toward Commander Zalthor, waiting for his reaction, but he remained silent. The voice continued. Humanity does not seek war. The words were simple, clear, peaceful. For centuries we have observed the galaxy. We have learned from every conflict and every mistake. The message paused for a moment. Then it continued. But when war comes to our home, the tactical screen suddenly showed another Zarex cruiser disappearing. We end it. Across the bridge, the young officers felt the growing weight of those words. Because the battle outside was proving them true, the message from Earth continued broadcasting across the fleet. We never started these wars, the calm voice said. But we always finish them. Commander Zalthor slowly turned toward the communication console. Trace that signal, he ordered. But the technicians shook their heads. It is coming from multiple locations at once. The human broadcast was being transmitted from dozens of hidden stations across the solar system. It could not be blocked. It could not be traced. And it could not be ignored. Outside the flagship, another group of Zarex destroyers vanished from the tactical screen. The remaining alien ships were now badly scattered. Many captains were already requesting emergency retreat permission. But Zalthor had not given that order. The proud commander was still staring at the image of Earth on the main display. The blue planet looked peaceful. Clouds drifted slowly across its oceans. From this distance it looked harmless. Yet the forces protecting it had already destroyed nearly half of the Zarex fleet. One of the old generals stepped closer to the command chair again. Commander, he said quietly, this battle cannot be won. Zalthor did not respond immediately. He continued watching the tactical screen as more ships disappeared. Human vessels moved through the battlefield like silent shadows. They attacked only when necessary. They never wasted movement, and they never exposed themselves to unnecessary risk. It was not a chaotic war. It was a controlled operation. Finally, Zalthor spoke. How long? He asked. The sensor officer checked the combat logs. Commander? How long has this battle lasted? The officer looked at the timer. 23 minutes. The bridge became silent again. 23 minutes. In less than half an hour, one of the largest fleets in Zarex history had been nearly destroyed. Another alarm sounded. Commander, we lost contact with the Eastern Battle Group. The tactical display now showed only a small number of Zarex ships still active. The human fleet, however, remained almost untouched. One of the younger officers whispered quietly, "This is impossible." But the old general shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "This is preparation." He looked toward the distant planet again. Humans have spent centuries preparing. For the day someone would ignore the warning. Outside the flagship, human ships continued their calm advance. They were closing the final distance toward the remaining Zarex vessels. Across the solar system, one truth was becoming painfully clear. The legends about humanity had never been exaggerated. They had been warnings. Warnings that the galaxy had tried to remember for generations. But Commander Zalthor had ignored them. And now the last part of that warning was about to become reality. Because attacking humans was not simply a battle. It was a mistake the galaxy only needed to witness once. The battle in the human solar system was no longer a battle. It had become a slow and unavoidable defeat. Across the dark silence of space, the remaining Zarex warships drifted in broken formations. What had once been a proud armada of thousands was now only a scattered collection of damaged vessels. Inside the flagship Iron Dominion, the command bridge looked completely different from before. The confident laughter that had filled the room earlier was gone. Now there was only tension. And fear. "Commander, we have lost 70% of the fleet." The officer's voice was quiet, almost shaken. Another report appeared on the tactical display. "Outer formations completely destroyed. Support carriers gone. Defense grid collapsing." Commander Zalthor stood silently in front of the giant star map. The glowing red icons that once filled the screen had almost disappeared. Human ships surrounded what remained of the Zarex fleet from every direction. But something strange was happening. The humans were no longer attacking. Instead, their ships held position at a careful distance. Watching. Waiting. One of the younger officers spoke nervously. "Commander, why did they stop?" Another officer checked the sensors. "Their weapons are still active." The old general stepped forward slowly. "They are giving us a choice." Zalthor did not turn around. "A choice?" he asked quietly. "Yes." The general pointed toward the distant blue planet shown on the screen. "Humans do not destroy enemies without reason." The commander's fists tightened, but before he could answer, the communication console suddenly activated again. A signal filled every Zarex channel. The same calm human voice returned. "This is United Earth Defense Command." The message echoed across the remaining alien ships. "The battle is over." Several Zarex officers looked at each other in disbelief. Outside the flagship, hundreds of human warships slowly moved into a wider formation. They were leaving a narrow path open through the blockade. The human voice continued. "You entered our system with weapons and hostile intent." A pause followed. "But humanity does not seek unnecessary destruction." On the tactical display, the open path through the human fleet became clearer. It was an exit. A chance to leave. "Commander," one of the younger officers whispered, "they are letting us retreat." Zalthor stared at the screen. For the first time since the war began, the proud Zarex commander felt the weight of his mistake. The old generals had warned him. The galaxy had warned him. But he had believed the legends were exaggerated. Now the truth was impossible to ignore. Humanity had not destroyed the fleet completely. Because they did not need to. The lesson had already been delivered. The command bridge remained, silent as every officer waited for Zalthor's decision. Outside the flagship, the human fleet continued to hold its position. Hundreds of ships floated in perfect stillness, their weapons ready but not firing. The open escape corridor remained clear. The message from Earth repeated one final time. "You may leave." For a long moment, Commander Zalthor said nothing. He looked again at the tactical display. Only a small fraction of his fleet remained. Thousands of warships had entered the system. Now only a few hundred damaged vessels were still operational. The rest had vanished in the silent precision of human warfare. Finally, the Zarex commander spoke. "Signal all surviving ships." The communications officer nodded quickly. "Channel open." Zalthor took a slow breath. Then he gave the order he never expected to give. "Retreat." The command spread across the broken fleet. Damaged Zarex ships slowly turned toward the narrow corridor between the human formations. One by one, they began leaving the solar system. The human fleet did not pursue them. They simply watched as the invaders disappeared into deep space. Hours later, the surviving Zarex vessels finally escaped human territory. Behind them, the blue planet Earth continued its quiet orbit around the sun. The war had ended almost as suddenly as it began, but the story did not end there. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Other empires had been watching the conflict from distant systems. They had seen the destruction of the Zarex fleet. They had seen the calm precision of humanity's defense. And they had seen the final warning. Soon a message began spreading across countless star systems, from one empire to another, from one commander to the next. It was not a threat. It was advice. A simple rule for survival. Older warriors repeated it to younger soldiers. Military academies recorded it in their history lessons, and every new fleet commander eventually heard the same sentence. Never attack humans. Because the galaxy had finally learned the truth. Humanity did not rush into wars. They did not search for enemies. They simply waited, prepared, watching, learning. And when someone finally chose to threaten their home, the result was always the same. Attacking humans was not a battle. It was a death sentence.